Welcome to the first week of Managing Workforce Diversity lecture. Diversity topics are so broad that no single comprehensive theory or model encompasses all diversity concerns. At different times, different aspects have been the focus of conceptual efforts. Therefore, it is very important to have a common understanding of what is it that we actually mean by the term diversity in its various dimensions. So it's important to start with a common definition. Diversity describes all the personal, professional, and cultural characteristics and qualities that tend to make us as a person or as human beings similar to or different from another person. So diversity is inclusive of all the characteristics that make us unique as human beings. We have some control over some of these characteristics while very little to no control over others. For example, genetic versus our profession. We can control our profession, but we cannot obviously change our genetics. Some characteristics tend to be more important to who we are as human beings. So different characteristics may impact people differently at various times or in various situations. Academically, note that oppression theory holds that in every society there are constraints, often unconscious, in terms of social inequality and group membership that shape a person's life choices. For example, in an environment of war and conflict, a female might choose to be a teacher, since she and her family might see this as one of the safest options, since the duties can be completed in a person's neighborhood or nearby as opposed to driving or traveling miles and miles away from home. Alternatively, she may choose to become a lawyer to protect the rights of war victims, or even a doctor to treat injured children, or become an astronaut in hopes of eventually traveling to another world. These choices may have a positive impact on her due to the shortage of experts from her community in these fields. However, these can also have negative impacts depending on the situation and circumstances in a given culture. In any case, if she becomes a medical doctor, what is she going to be known as? A female doctor, Chinese doctor, African American doctor, or just a doctor? This is where we can talk about social identity theory. Social identity theory is used to describe how people actually define themselves in terms of individual importance of their sociocultural categories. This medical doctor might choose to identify herself as African American doctor, or Afghan American doctor, or as a Chinese doctor, or just by her name, Dr. Nilofer Mujtaba, for example. So diversity impacts professionals in all fields, medicine or general healthcare, retail, education, mining, politics, military, social sciences, Air Force, transportation, law, and sciences in general, because diversity includes culture, race, ethnicity, as well as your gender, your social class, your age, your sexual orientation, religion, and other differences, obviously, that exist among people. So there are many approaches to dealing with diversity in order to take advantage of it. These can range from acculturation to assimilation, which is the melting pot theory, to acceptance and accommodation, or sensitivity to differences in understanding, and to appreciation and integration of differences. In other words, valuing and managing differences. In addition, culture underlies differences and similarities as well, and all cultures obviously tend to be unique. At the personal level, culture gives us identities, tells us how to act, how to react, and culture gives us social judgments, including stereotypes, which can be negative in many cases. People have multiple group memberships with conflicting values, and there are also value differences within the cultures. So cultures are not static. In other words, they change with time and with circumstances and with situations. I want you to keep in mind that managing diversity is about inclusion or enabling each employee in your workplace to perform up to or beyond his or her potential, regardless of whether he or she is of one race, religion, or body size, or gender, or sexual orientation, or another. So managing diversity requires that we actually avoid prejudices and stereotypes in our decision making. This is where it becomes a little bit more challenging, difficult for all of us. Prejudice is an attitude usually with negative feelings that involves a prejudgment about members of a particular group. On the other hand, stereotypes are formed when we ascribe to generalizations to people based on their group identities and the tendencies of the whole group, rather than seeing a person as an individual who may or may not have those tendencies that his or her culture tends to demonstrate. The goal of today's professionals and managers should be to create an inclusive organizational culture for all of their employees in the department or in the company. Some modern leaders recommend using the word inclusion because the concept of diversity tends to reinforce the idea of casting a token person of color or minority to diversify a project or even a team, and not necessarily bringing actual change. However, the word inclusion, according to experts, articulates what we want, which is to be included. It's about having a seat at the table where the discussion is being held. So an inclusive culture exists where members of each group can be heterogeneous or diverse in many dimensions, and together they create a distinctive competitive advantage through teamwork and their unique cultural knowledge. Diversity management is the process of consciously being inclusive in becoming culturally competent by understanding the needs, the wants, the desires, the strengths, the weaknesses, the beliefs, and the values of each employee in your department, in each of your colleagues, while providing him or her the opportunity to contribute to the department or to the project. Thereby, we would be creating synergistic results that are equal to or even greater than the sum of the individual parts. So workforce diversity management is about creating harmony in our head, in our heart, and in our habits. In other words, what we think, what we feel, and what we actually do are the same. So what you think, feel, and do should all be consistent. As always, you should aim to be an inclusive professional, manager, and leader in your department and your organization. Good luck.